At the studio with Kitchen Theory today, we're very lucky to have Mr. KP, who is the co-founder of the Founders Club, of which I'm a very proud member. KP, it's wonderful to have you here.
Joseph, it's actually my pleasure to be here. So thank you very much for having me on your show. Really appreciate it.
Pleasure. So we met several years ago, and I think we really bonded over a common appreciation for entrepreneurship.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we also really bonded over a common appreciation for experiences.
Yeah, yeah.
And having seen your work and the work that you do at the Founders Club, I can see that creating meaningful experiences at the Founders Club is really important. And really having a good understanding of what, I guess, luxury and hospitality and experience are all about and what they mean to people and how, I guess, founders of companies promote these ideas. And you guys work with a lot of brands who are very much in touch with these kind of ideas. What is it that, I guess, got you inspired to really kind of work in this field and want to work with founders and work at that kind of higher end of kind of luxury and hospitality?
It's a great question. Thanks, Joseph. And I mean, before the club existed, before we launched the club in 2020, we were in publishing, and our publishing business essentially was driven around high-end luxury business publications. So, right from day one, we were in that sphere. We were dealing with premium brands, luxury brands, that's where we were positioned. So for us, it organically, we kind of went into that. But over those years in the publishing industry, we got to work with different brands and work with different partners and experience certain things. But also, Joseph, the landscape has changed over the last decade, if you may, whereas I think our requirements as humans has differed, not just over the last decade, even over the last 4 years since COVID, everything has become a lot more about appreciating something. It's become about touch. It's become about feel. It's become about all of these different things. And I think as people, as humans, we're more in tune to that now as well, so when we launched the club in 2020, for us it was very much about, we don't want to do the basic stuff. If we're sure we could bring all of our founders in a room and to connect with each other, that is the crux of it. But why not take it a step beyond? Why not create experiences? Why not create, and that doesn't always mean one thing. It could mean having a specific speaker in a room, or it could be having certain food in a room or drink, or whatever it may be. But there has to be a certain level of elevation now, and I think we've all grown to respect and appreciate that, not just because of the landscape, but because also of things like COVID as well.
And you work a lot in that kind of field or the realm of luxury. What is luxury? How do we define what luxury is? Luxury something that's tangible and inherent in a product, or is it the way we experience it? Is it the experience of the product? How do you define luxury?
I love that question, because most people will define luxury as a thing. They will look at gold, marble. They will look at tangible things, something you can touch and feel. That's luxury. For me, and this is something that I learned many years ago, was luxury is a feeling.
I like that.
It's not a thing. It's not, luxury is rarity. So, and one of our partners, it's a Maldivian resort called Saniva, and the founder, he's become a good friend, and he said to me a few years ago, because I asked him exactly the same question, and he said to me, when you're on the way to our resort in the Maldives, on the boat, We will take your shoes and we'll put them in a tote bag for you and pass them to you in that bag. And then we'll say, for the next 7 nights, 10 nights, 14 nights that you are on the island, you do not have to wear shoes. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner, you come barefoot. You let the sand, caress between your toes throughout the whole duration you're on the island. That, my friend, is luxury. It's the rarity of something. If you have something every day, you could have the most expensive watch, but you have it every day, you wear it every day. It's not luxury anymore.
Agreed.
When you have something which you cannot, simple thing of having, sand under your feet for 7 days, you don't have to put on shoes. That's luxury. So luxury,
yeah, because it's everything that comes with it, right? Because it's not just about not wearing the shoes. It's not just about the sand. It's about what that represents, right? It's about the leisure. It's about the time, the freedom. That's the luxury, that you have the time for 7 days to have the sand between your toes. Yeah. That's the real luxury part.
Absolutely. And I think, once there is this connotation, I guess sometimes, there can be a negative connotation to when people say, oh, luxury, because it's a word that's thrown around so much these days. Oh, they do luxury watches, or they do luxury cars, or they do luxury this. The reality is, luxury is a feeling. So once you realize that, once you appreciate that and respect that, you have a whole new, understanding of what the meaning of luxury is. And then you realize, actually, it's not a thing. And it could be something very, very simple. For somebody who lives in a third world country and having an ice cold drink, that's luxury.
Yeah.
So it's very, but for me, when you ask me, KP, what is luxury? For me, it's 100%, it's a feeling.
And when you talk about kind of luxury and the experience of it, I guess I always think, when it comes to, let's say, my industry of food and hospitality, I guess I differentiate quite a bit, because people kind of use the terms the service industry and the hospitality industry interchangeably. But I actually think there's an interesting almost differentiation between the two. Service industry, I would say, walking into any kind of coffee shop, if you walk into a high street coffee shop, if you walk into a fast food restaurant, you get served.
Sure.
There's an element of service there. Admittedly, in a lot of quick service restaurants now, there's less of that service, because you're walking up to a kiosk maybe and keying in your order. But nonetheless, there's an element of service there, right? For as long as they have humans there, there's an element until the until the robots start serving you your burger. But even then, arguably, that's service, right? The business is serving your needs. And then I would differentiate hospitality as being something that's really boils down to that word of being a host.
Yeah.
Bringing people into your space.
Sure.
Welcoming them. And going back to what we were talking about with luxury, I think hospitality is such a key component of a luxurious experience. How is it that, or in your, I guess, travels and with the brands and companies that you deal with, what is it that they do that makes that experience more engaging? As I guess in Soneva, as an example, what is it that they do in a sense of hospitality that takes it from being just service into hospitality?
Yeah. And when it comes down to it, Joseph, as humans, there's one key thing we're all looking for, is the feeling of being important. That is always, and I think when that comes into question, and that's, you start understanding that's where it all begins. So I tell my daughters all the time, there is a difference between good service and great service. And the analogy I always use, I say, look, if we go to a hotel and you've forgotten your toothbrush, and you call down to reception and you tell them, can you bring me up a toothbrush because I've forgotten mine? Good service is that they bring you up a toothbrush. Great service is they bring you a toothbrush and toothpaste.
Right.
So I say, that is that's the difference between good and great. So the good is what you expect. The great is what you don't expect.
Oh, I like that. That reminds me of when I worked at the Connaught, when we were, I think it was during inductions or something like that, where they were giving examples of where the staff members, particularly, let's say, in the concierge or the front desk, had kind of gone above and beyond to serve the needs. And I remember one of the examples being a guest who'd walked in and had a hole in their pocket. And within the space of them giving the coat over to the concierge or whoever it was that they left their coat with, to when they picked it up, they'd had it sewn up.
Mm.
And it was that little bit of detail there that was really about, I guess, in a way, are we talking about taking initiative? Is it about initiative? Is that what we're talking about? Details and initiative?
No, I think, I mean, look, of course that plays a part in it, but it's what I said at the beginning. Once you realize the difference between good and great,
yeah,
and where you want to be positioned. So like you mentioned, you could go into a fast food restaurant or fast food, establishment and be served. That's not only that's where they are positioning themselves, but also that's what the customer is expecting. It depends on where, number one, where you want to position yourself. Where do you want your brand or your product to be? And then how do you get it to that? Because look, we're living in a world today, Joseph, where, AI is completely being groomed to take over many of the things that we're doing, but how does that affect, us as humans, in terms of what's our expectation? Going back to what I mentioned in terms of, we all want the feeling of being special.
Yeah.
We all want the feeling of being valued. And how do you do that? And ultimately, that's what it comes down to. Whether you are in the food industry, whether you're in the hotel industry, whether you are, in hospitality, is that fine detail. So yesterday I had the pleasure of interviewing Michael Bonter, who's the managing director of the Chancery Rosewood, which is opening up. But for the last 10 years, he's been at the Rosewood London. And a very similar question, we talked about luxury and we talked about, hospitality, and how do you go about, creating such a brand. And, he said, the biggest thing in hotel hospitality is how many times a customer will return back to the hotel. That's where that's where you set the precedence. And we talked about various things that actually what the hotel does, to what we do as a club, and what's important to someone. And, it's like what you were saying. When you say, is it an expectation? Is it going beyond expectations? Yes, of course. That is, if that's where you're positioning yourself. And actually, if you're trying to create an experience, then you have to learn to go beyond the expectations. I stayed at the Rosewood Bangkok in 2019. And when I checked in and I got into my room, I looked at the bar, and above the bar, they had these kind of cocktail making utensils and 2 pre-made cocktails in bottles. One was a Negroni and the other one was an old fashioned. And I looked at it and said, those are my drinks. Like, that can't be a coincidence. And later I found out,
those are my drinks too.
Are they?
Oh yeah.
Maybe it was
when we're done.
And later I found out that actually brands like the Rosewood, what they do is that they scour certain guests' social medias. And what they do is that they identify, what does this person like to drink? What does this person like to eat? What do they enjoy in life? And we don't realize that we'll post certain things on social media, not knowing, not understanding, but these people, and that is it. So when you walk in, this is what, 2019. So we're talking 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And I still remember that.
Well, this is it. But that, you see, even with what we do at Kitchen Theory, I always say there's a distinction between something that's memorable, and that's something that, an experience that you can have that you'll take away with you that is in mind, and something that's remarkable, which is where you feel compelled to tell other people about, right? Because if you think about what the word remarkable is, it means that you've gone around telling other people about this,
Absolutely.
right? You've had to remark about it in some way. And usually, I guess it's in a positive connotation, right? When you say that something's remarkable. And I do think that there's a big difference in something that you can do that feels personal to me, or that I, will remember forever, versus something that I'm so excited about and it's so interesting or unique or different, like turning up to a hotel and having my favorite cocktails pre-made for me. That's remarkable. And I guess it's interesting to think of how brands and companies, can they do more of this stuff that makes them remarkable?
I think they have to. I think they have to. If you simply look at, let's say, the retail space. So as we all know, the retail landscape over the last number of years has changed dramatically, where there were shops on all the high streets. Now there's not. So, the question or the discussion is always floating around that how do we bring customers into stores? Is there a need for retail outlets anymore? I mean, we all know we can go into shopping centers, which we know and loved years ago. We go there now and it's like a ghost town. So
yeah,
it is an experience. It has to be an experience. The Bentley showroom in Mayfair, Jack Barclay.
Yeah.
Now there's always been there's always been awareness around drinking and driving. It's
Sure.
you never ever mix the two. But when they've done the refurb at Jack Barclay, they put a huge, essentially a bar in the middle of the showroom. When you walk in during the day, I mean, it acts as a reception desk.
Sure.
But in the afternoons, it turns into a bar. And for events, they use it as a bar. It's a beautiful circular bar that they've created, bar stroke reception desk, if you may. But the idea, when I was speaking to one of the guys at Bentley, they said, it's the experience. So when you now come to Bentley, you're not jumping into a car here immediately, but what we'll do, we can make you a coffee, we can make you a cocktail, we can, pour you a glass of champagne. You can sit here, you can sit at the bar, and we can talk about so just like you would go to a bar and the barman is talking to you about life's issues.
Yeah.
You're sitting at a bar and someone's pouring you a glass of champagne, but you're talking about your dream car, you're talking about the Bentley, you're talking about the dynamics has completely, now it's gone from going into somewhere looking at a car to an experience.
Sure.
So I think, to answer your question, can brands or should brands be doing more? I think they have to. I think they really, really have to, in order for brands to grow, for companies to grow. There has to be something beyond just providing what people's expectations are. We have to go beyond that.
I remember seeing you bring to mind a really interesting kind of case study that I remember having read about, which was IMG Bank had decided, banking can be kind of maybe arduous. It can be very formulaic. It can be very bureaucratic, and they wanted to find a way of engaging in a softer, more experiential, essentially, way with their clientele. And so they ended up essentially opening up an IMG cafe, and that was their way of kind of creating a much more warmer, more intimate, more enjoyable banking experience for their clients. And in the same vein, when you talked about kind of retail, what it immediately made me think of when we talk about kind of experience in retail, do you know the Disney stores?
Yeah, absolutely.
I always think they're missing a trick.
Right.
I always think a Disney store should just be magic.
Yeah.
You should walk into there and it should be going into almost like a mini Disneyland.
Yeah.
You should be walking in there and it should just excite you so much that you've got to walk out with something.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it just feels like you're walking into one big tourist trap or one big kind of overpriced merchandise store, as opposed to when you walk into Disneyland or Disney World, you're walking into magic. And I don't feel that they've translated that from what is the magic of the core Disney brand into their retail in some way.
I get what you mean. Have you ever walked into a Hamleys store?
Yep.
Yeah. So, Hamleys, they get it, right? So
Yep.
Disney should be, I guess, now that you're saying it, you're right. Disney should be having that. You've got people outside the store doing magic tricks, and you go inside and you've got the staff essentially playing with the toys,
Yep.
to show, so it actually feels quite magical.
And it's fun. It's so engaging, right? It's engaging to watch people, as you said, playing with those toys, to see how they work. That must sell so much more, right? Just by having that kind of added level engagement, which I guess brings us to this idea of, you had mentioned that things have changed a lot in retail. I'd say things have changed a lot in hospitality as well.
Of course.
Kind of over the last 5 years or so. So there's a book that I read. It was initially started as a paper that was published in Harvard Business Review, I think in 1999, that was called The Experience Economy. And it was by Joseph Pine and I think it's David Gilmour. I'd actually interviewed Joseph for our podcast a few years ago. And we were talking about the experience economy and how this is becoming, and this is at that time, pre-pandemic, had already become quite a important part of businesses' kind of considerations for their future strategies and plans. And now in this kind of post-COVID era, we see that the experience economy just seems to be going through the roof, right? Given all the kind of luxury brands that you work with through the Founders Club, how are they adapting to this? What are they doing that is kind of, taking, as you said, the Jack Barkley example there with Rolls-Royce is a great one. What are some of these other guys doing to kind of turn their brands into something that really engages with their clients?
It's a great question. And, I think it starts with people. That's where I think it also starts with, you've got to have the right people, because sometimes the product or service, let's say the product can only be maneuvered to a certain place. So beyond that, what do you do? How do you create that magic? How do you, so it's got to be, where was I? I went to, so one of the other resorts in the Maldives in which I represent is a 5-star all-inclusive resort called Kora Kora Maldives. And just by simple...
I've seen you posting about those and I'm always envious, but go on.
Yeah, no, it is that, I mean, Maldives is always a good idea, right? They're both beautiful places, Suniva and Kora Kora. And they've adapted tiny things like, I would say to any member of staff, how are you doing? And they would look at me and say, fantastic. And initially, the first person who said it to me was one of the waiting staff. And I just thought, oh, what a lovely answer, And they said it with so much conviction. It was only until I saw someone else, I think maybe at reception desk, and, I said, oh, how you doing? And they said, fantastic. And just that simple word they've adopted as part of the island's culture, is that when somebody asks you, how are you? Your response should be fantastic, because what it does is that it also, number one, it's not something that you'll hear all the time from people. When you ask someone, they'll say good or fine, or yeah, I'm good, I'm okay. But when someone says fantastic, in your own mind, you're conjuring, what's making this person fantastic? Is it the weather? Is it the island? Is it something,
Sure.
So it's just, sometimes it's tiny details like that. But again, that comes from people. It comes from processes. It comes from, adapting a culture into the businesses. So it's an amalgamation of all these things,
Yeah, I think I realized this years ago when or the importance of people in experiences. A few years ago, we did some research looking at people's memories of dining experiences, because we wanted to know, what do you remember a week after you've attended our experience? What do you remember a month or 2 months after you've attended our experience? Just curious as to what people's memories, how they would describe the experience, not really judging whether they liked or didn't like it as much as what were their memories of it. And it was fascinating to see the amount of false memories that people have when it comes to what they've eaten. So people would talk about things like the chocolate ice cream. Well, there was no chocolate ice cream on the menu. There was maybe you know, a chocolate mousse of some type that maybe they've distorted in their minds. You know, I think at the time when we were doing this research, there was something like there's some kind of a pickled fish kind of element on one of the dishes, and so many people talked about the pickled herring, and you think, well, no, it wasn't pickled herring that we had on the menu, but when it came to their most vivid memories, the things that they could talk about in greater detail, and when it came to the most memorable aspects of the experience, it was the people.
Absolutely.
Both the company that they were in and the people who were serving them. And this ranked way higher than where the food was, because even things like the ambience, the temperature, the music, that all those environmental factors, even that seems to count higher than where the food comes in terms of what people's memories, how they recall things, and the accuracy of their memories. And so I completely agree with you that having the right people that are presenting your product or service, that counts for a hell of a lot when it comes to the overall experience.
It does, Joseph. And, you know, it's one of those things where we all know, look, if you could go to a restaurant and the food could be spectacular, but the service is bad, I guarantee you're never going to go back there.
100%.
You could go to a restaurant where the food is mediocre, but the service is so good, you're going to go back again.
Oh, I've made this point so many times myself.
Absolutely.
100% I agree. And I've experienced that myself.
Yeah.
You'll go somewhere where the food is okay,
Yeah.
but the service is great. The atmosphere is great. The whole experience of being there is fun. And you come away with, you know, feeling that your time and money have been well spent, versus going to certain places where the food could be absolutely incredible, but unless that service is there to back that up and you've had that positive experience, what are the chances of going back? And if the experience has been poor in terms of a negative service experience, doesn't matter how good the food is, there's almost no chance that you're going to go back to that place.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
people, it most definitely counts for an awful lot. So talking about kind of memories of dining experiences, what would you say is one of your most memorable dining experiences?
It's a fantastic question, and it makes you think, actually, because through my mind I'm running through obviously all the dining experiences that I've had over the years. If I may, can I run through three quickly?
Go ahead.
All right. So the first one was I was never really into fine dining. Growing up, I was never really into it. I always called it big plate, small food places. You know, don't want to go to those places. But many moons ago, one of my first fine dining experiences was at the Gordon Ramsay restaurant, the main one, Royal Hospital Road, I think it is, 3 Michelin star.
Yeah.
And, you know, we had a tasting menu, and I was so impressed at everything. You know, if I'm being honest, initially I felt it was a bit clinical. You walk in, you don't know, you feel like you've got to sit with a straight back, and
Sure.
you know, but as the food started coming out, the way, the presentation, the service, the attention to detail, I was in awe. Both my wife and I. So we both went to experience that, and then we made a pact to say, actually, every year, you know, on our anniversary, or you know, we're definitely going to try different Michelin dining experiences or fine dining. You know, so we're both big fans of fine dining. So that is probably the first time I fell in love with fine dining experiences and restaurants. So Gordon Ramsay was the first one. The other one that really stands out for me was, I think it's called Dan's Lenoir, which is dining in the dark. You know, as an experience, it was very interesting, and not just because you're sitting in the dark dining, it's because, you know, everything that surrounds you. When somebody says to you that most, if not all, of the waiting staff are partially sighted or blind, it adds something to it, you know,
Sure.
because equally you're sitting in that environment and you're thinking about the people around you and the waiting staff. And but the other thing that's very interesting, what they do is, you know, it's not just putting the plates in front of you. The whole concept is for you to try the food and guess the experience. Guess the ingredients, guess ingredients on your taste buds. And this is something that generally we don't do because we eat with our eyes first, so we can see what's there. So, you know, that was a great experience. And if you may, chef, I'd be amiss if I didn't say kitchen theory. And I'm not just saying that because, you know, I've had the pleasure of experiencing and enjoying your culinary delights a few times, and also the fact that we're good friends. But the reason I have experienced it a few times, and the reason I come back is because, and I come back and I bring people with me.
Yeah.
And the reason I do that is because what we talked about earlier, when we can go around talking about something, and many years ago, I adopted this process of sharing experiences is a lot better than telling about experiences.
Yeah.
You know, I can go and sing the songs about a restaurant or the Maldives, you know, but unless you can share that experience with someone, and that's why I started bringing everyone. And there's dishes that you have on the menu which has really opened some of them are comical, you know, because it makes you smile. You know, some of them, you know, they'll make you smile. Some of them, you know, my favorite part of the kitchen theory experience has been the emotion. Has been the emotion that you go through. The flavors are fantastic. The dishes are amazing, you know, but the emotion that you go through, you know, and it's not like that. It's very subtle. It's very subtle. And I think that is the reason why. Is it getting weird? Am I making you uncomfortable?
No. I'm always open to hearing about how great our experiences are. No, but I really do appreciate
But no, that's the honest truth. So if you said to me you know, which are the dining experiences that, you know, ring out to me is 100% those three, you know, because it's not, sometimes, like if you ask me what did I have at the Gordon Ramsay restaurant, I don't remember.
Yeah.
But I do remember them bringing one of the dishes, and it had some salad, and it had carrots, but carrots were like literally like an inch, but they looked like carrots. They were carrots, but and I was saying, I wonder how they make those. Like literally, like they look like toys, you know. And so I remember that, but you know, it's what you walk away from and remember. You know, and that's what we're talking about. It's actually not the food as such, it's actually the experience. You know, that's what. So those are my top three places.
Well, they sound like a good top three. But to pick up on something that you talked about earlier, and I think this is an interesting. You talked about personalization, and I think when it comes to luxury and when it comes to experience, personalization is now all the rage in everything.
Yeah.
How can you personalize experiences? What do you think are ways that companies can kind of personalize experiences that make them, what is it about that makes it more engaging? Why do we want, and why does having a more personalized experience make it more enjoyable?
It's because you are involved in the process. And when you are involved in the process, again, you feel valued. You feel like your voice matters. Going back to the Soneva example, when you stay at Soneva, the week before you arrive on the resort, they'll send you this wonderful pre-island questionnaire, and they'll ask you, would you like your rooms scented with lemongrass? Or I think there was another option. How do you like your pillows? Do you like duck feathers? Do you like memory foam? Do you like, you know, they ask you what flavor ice creams do you like? They ask you, so there's this series of questions that they ask you. If you're not asked and you go to Geneva and you stay in the villa and you walk in and every room has this beautiful scent of lemongrass. You're going to walk in and say, that smells beautiful. It smells like a spa in here.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to worry. You're not going to care about it. But the fact that they gave you the option a week ago, the reality is, you know, it doesn't really matter to them, because they could put, you know, one fragrance or lemongrass, the other fragrance, you know. But the fact that they've consulted you, the process becomes a lot more special to you.
And I guess you become more mindful of it, right, as well? Because
Okay.
now you're walking into the room and, oh, that's the scent that I chose.
Absolutely.
And so now, I guess there's almost that kind of, what do they call it? Is it the IKEA effect, that you value something more because you had a hand in making it in some way, that
Yeah.
gives it kind of added value? And because you've been a part of that journey of curating that experience, maybe that in itself is enough to make you feel that this is a better
Yeah.
experience
Yeah.
that's more personalized and tailored to you.
Yeah. And, you know, look, I don't think it's something that everyone can do. I use the example of Geneva because I just came back from there, and that was the experience that my family and I did that. And, you know, I appreciate that not everyone can do that. So how do you make it that? And there is just tiny details that I think you have to go beyond. I think you just have to go beyond those expectations to say, actually, how do we create something which is authentic? When I say authentic, because the consumer today is a lot more advanced than, you know, the consumers used to be. We as consumers used to be, you know, 5-10 years ago. We can see through it. We can see through the BS. If someone's just doing something because it's a sales gimmick, or, you know, we can very clearly say, you know, see through it. But when someone has done something because it is authentic to them, to their brand, to their product, to their service, all of a sudden you feel part of it and you respect that, you know. I think that's what makes a difference.
And adding to that, you've got your Make It Personal experience with us coming up soon as well.
I do.
I'm really looking forward to that.
I'm super excited. I'm super excited for that.
And it's actually coming up really soon. It's in June.
It's in mid-June.
Mid-June.
Yeah. Just so mid-June. When does this podcast go out?
Oh, I think it'll be after the
Okay,
15th.
good. Because besides my wife and my daughter and my brother and his wife, nobody else knows.
Ooh,
Nobody else knows that this is where they're coming.
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, they're in store
Yeah,
for
so I've just told them
an experience of a lifetime.
Absolutely. And because a couple of people, I said, where are we going for dinner? I said, it's a surprise. I said, you don't need to know, because for me it's, you know, lots of my friends, family, founders are, you know, they know that we're good friends, and they know that I've been to your you know, your dining experience many a times. But they don't know they're coming here. And for me, it was actually, and exactly like I was saying, I could talk about it until the cows come home.
Yeah.
But unless what the special things in life is when you are able to experience that with the people around you,
100%.
that's where the magic is.
100%.
That's where the magic is.
So you guys at Founders Club work with a lot of brands. We work with a lot of brands. And I have to say that I think that most companies these days are really after trying to create products, services, and experiences to promote those products and services that are authentic. But that's actually very, very difficult to do. Authenticity is rarely can you kind of buy that in. It has to be something that is maybe kind of, well, that is intrinsic to the brand, or that is, you know, there's a genuineness there, right? And I think that consumers can see that. They can see that authenticity. Does that add to the, I guess, luxury of an experience? The fact that something's more authentic and it's more genuine? Why do we value that? Why does authenticity and genuineness, why is it that brands that seems to be the holy grail, kind of chasing after this really authentic kind of experience, or selling that idea?
It's because it connects you a little bit closer. Let me give you an example. What's your heritage?
My father's Egyptian, my mom's English.
Okay, so let's say, you know, from the father's side, You have a beautiful dining experience here. If there was a dish added to your menu which had an Egyptian heritage to it and there was a story behind it, why? Because the mastermind behind it, that's his story, that's his heritage, you know. All of a sudden, the thread runs through it, and you get it and you understand. It's not just a gimmick to say, oh, here's a dish which they served in ancient Egypt.
Yeah.
It's that may be the presentation, but why is this dish, which is an ancient Egyptian dish, why? It's because the founder of Kitchen Theory, that's his heritage, and actually that's what it runs through, you know.
So essentially it's about selling stories and narratives.
Story is a huge thing to it. A story, there's touch points, because you could have a fantastic story, but the product may not be there. You know, you may have the product and the story is fantastic, but the delivery, the service, you know, is not quite there. So the reality is the touch points to all these things have to be perfected. You know, and I say that very carefully because nothing is ever really perfected. You know, perfection is that thing that we're always
Kitchen Theory, we're believers in the Japanese philosophy of Kaizen. Kaizen being I guess the in a nutshell way of expressing it or explaining it is, every time you approach doing a task or providing a service or making or doing anything, it could be cleaning a floor, it could be cooking, it could be whatever it is, that you try and do it that bit better than you did it last time. And that if you ever achieve perfection, well, you're just getting complacent. That there is no such thing as perfection. You continuously strive to make things that little bit better each time you do them. And that's the kind of philosophy that the team and I have adopted here for, well, a decade now, and continue to, because it's a continuous process, right? You never achieve peak Kaizen. You're continuously looking for ways to, in some way, refine, improve, tweak what you do. I guess why we adopted this at Kitchen Theory, because a lot of work that you do in the kitchen, especially for the kind of food that we do, involves repeated processes and techniques that the more you repeat them, the more you practice them, the better you can get, and the better the end result. And it really does require time and patience and effort. Now, if you get to a point with anything in the kitchen, you think, I know how to do it, that's when you start losing quality.
It's funny you say that. We hosted a club breakfast this morning, and I was speaking to one of our members. We were having a conversation, and he was asking, you know, what kind of members do you have in the club? And I was explaining the type of member. And I said, the type of member which we generally don't look for is the type of member that comes in with an I know mentality. You know, when you say, you know, oh, you know, how do you do this? Oh, yeah, I know it. Oh, yeah, I know that. Oh, I know that. Because once you start doing that and you convince yourself that you know it, you're completely blockading that area of growth, you know. And there is so much always to learn, you know. I've had the pleasure of sitting down with some amazing people who have achieved greatness, but they equally always say there's still so much for me to learn, because the landscape everywhere is constantly changing, you know.
And I think if given the kind of members that you have at the Founders Club, given what their ambitions are, I think if you don't approach your industry, your life, your everything that you do with this idea of being open to learning, then you'll end up stagnating.
Yes.
And that will never get you far enough. You continuously need to be driven by this curiosity, interest. And I think what you tend to find is that the people who are most experienced in their industry tend to be the ones that are willing to admit that they don't know certain things, that they still want to learn and grow. And because I think it's almost that idea of the more you know, the more you realize you don't know.
Yeah, correct. Correct.
But you have to keep learning to realize that there are things that you don't know.
Yeah.
And the more, and this could even be in academia as well, or even as a chef, you could say, I can cook, but the more you get into it, the more you realize, well, no, there's plenty I don't know. There are plenty of techniques and cuisines and methods and ingredients that I don't know that I don't know about them.
Yeah.
A great example would be when we were in Saudi Arabia last year. I'd never been to Saudi Arabia. I'd been all over the Gulf and Middle East region. First time going to Saudi Arabia. What an eye-opening experience that was. Just to look at the native ingredients, the culinary culture and history and traditions. I had no idea that they had such an incredible, deep-rooted culinary history. You just think of it as being, well, the desert.
Yeah.
And when you think of Saudi Arabia, what do you think of? Dates, maybe a few other kind of food items that might pop out. But when I went over there and experienced it, and you kind of realize, yeah, this is exactly why I enjoy doing what I do, because I get to travel around and learn. I get to learn about different ingredients, different cooking techniques, different cultures, different forms of hospitality. And that's what adds richness to then the overall work that we do here, because you take little bits from everything that you're learning. And then once I got to Saudi Arabia and I learned about some of these things, you start to realize, oh, wow, and it's regional. So the northern region versus the central or the south or the east or the west, they all actually have different dialects, different ingredients, different methods of preparing the same dish, even the same national dish, but they each have their own kind of ways of doing it. And I'm sure if I went within each region, I'd realize there are differences within there. And
sure.
But my point is, you can go down that rabbit hole and just keep exploring and exploring. And I think, as I said, the more you learn, the more you realize there is out there to learn.
Absolutely. I think, education is always a core focus on these things. And you have to accept that. You have to accept that I'm at a space where, when I say me, I'm talking about anyone.
Sure.
I want to learn, I want to grow. And once you adopt that and you understand and you say, actually, it doesn't matter what I do, I want to grow. And that's exactly what we do in the club. The club is designed for people who want to grow. Doesn't matter if you're turning over in your business £100,000 or £100 million. The idea is, do you still want to grow? If you are comfortable, and look, there are lots of people out there who are content and comfortable, and that's a beautiful thing for them if that's where they want to be. But the club is probably not for them then, because we as a crux of who we are and why we exist is to constantly push boundaries, constantly evolve, is constantly grow, not just in our business, not just as business people, but as humans. As humans, how do we grow as humans? What can we do today that's going to impact our lives tomorrow, is going to give us a complete different perspective the day after. So it's a complete process of perspective.
So KP, before we move on, we were talking about authenticity, and there is something that I wanted to pick up on there. I was having a conversation with someone a few days ago about this idea of they wanted to open up a small eatery. And their initial kind of idea was simple street food type concept. But within the first 10 minutes of explaining this concept, they already had this brand with its expansion plans and how many branches they could have and how this could grow. And I guess my reflection after they kind of finished talking to me about the business was, why don't you start with one that just does it really, really well? And instead of building this large chain in your mind, build one really good, authentic version of this. And if it does really well, then it has legs to grow in some way. And I guess what I'm getting to here is, can you have authenticity when you have that kind of growth, that when you're replicating a business model or a restaurant or a chain, or does that lose authenticity, or can you retain some of that?
I think you can definitely retain some of that. Going back to what you just mentioned, and I just wanted to pick up on something which you just said, Joseph, because I think a lot of business people, when they set up their business, they jump into that. They see the big picture. They see, okay, what are we doing? How can we scale up? How can we grow? How can we expand? We're going to do this today. We're going to do that tomorrow, and we're going to do that on the third day.
And they've almost got exit plans before they've started.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. When I speak to some people, when I speak to some of our members, when I speak to, budding entrepreneurs, my first question is always, what problem are you fixing? And even when we launched the club, that was the first question Sonny, my brother, we asked the question, what problem are we solving? And I use the word problem in a very delicate way, because even in your business, Joseph, when you launched Kitchen Theory, what problem are you solving? A problem in the way of, like, when someone goes out to dine or not, that's not a problem. But the reality is, why? What question you're really asking is, why is someone going to come to you and buy your product or service?
Sure. Well, the problem that I felt we were solving, just to answer that question, is I felt that if I had a friend who was coming to London for one night and one night only and said, I want an experience, a food experience that I can't find anywhere else in the world, I can only find in London, where should I go? And I couldn't find an answer to that. So I thought we should create something like that. I thought we should create an experience that genuinely feels different, doesn't feel like restaurant, doesn't feel like any kind of eatery that you would normally go to, and that you'd be hard pushed to go into even other places in the world or other cities in the world and find this kind of experience that we want to provide. So I completely get what you mean in terms of that problem doesn't actually have to be an issue that people are facing on a day-to-day, but it could be something that you're adding value in a way to the industry that you're going into.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, that's, I completely deviated from the initial question that you asked.
No, that's fine. No, this is what this is all about.
But when you said that to me, it just kind of triggered something which, what problem are we solving? What are we trying to do? And I think in that's where it all starts. That's, you have to be able to very comfortably answer that question before you get into any other parts of your business, and look, there's going to be people who may disagree with me. Some people may say, you've got to think big, you've got to walk into the room and, and shoot for the moon, and I'm not saying you can't, but you've also got to understand, where your feet are on the ground and say, actually, where are we? What are we trying to create? What problem are we trying to fix? Because unless you know that, you're never going to be able to reach what you're trying to reach. You have to know the basic. You have to know the fundamentals of it.
Yeah, sure. And I do think that nowadays more than ever, I mean, look, I interview culinary students as kind of interns or commie chefs, and you ask them, what do you want? What are your goals and plans? And they'll start telling you about their business that they're one day going to open up, and you think, look, your immediate goal should be to get some decent experience under your belt and to learn the craft and to learn about the business. And then you can kind of move on to thinking about what these bigger kind of goals and plans in terms of opening your own business are. But what I find is that a lot of younger and older people who want to get into entrepreneurship, that they really misunderstand that you need to focus on the basics of putting together a really great service or a really great product that people are going to want, that, as you said, solves some kind of a problem, or that adds value in some way to people's lives, as opposed to dreaming up this big, essentially money-making operation that's going to, make you wealthy and take care of your family. And there's all lovely things to do. But I think you're kind of missing the point in that sense. And it, for me, I always come back to this idea, if you want to have this laser sharp focus on just doing something really great. And if it's really great, people will come, and
Yeah.
people will want it, and people will buy it, and it will grow, and it'll turn into a chain if that's what it's meant to be. But I think starting out with these huge audacious plans, and look, fortune favors the bold, and maybe if you're going into pitch to investors, you want to have some of that bravado that comes out. But I do also think when it comes to where we started, this conversation was around authenticity. I think starting up that one outlet, that one unit, that one place that does something really, really well, that's far more important than thinking about how you're going to grow into 3, 4, 5 cities or branches or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And I guess that's my take on it. But
You're right, Joseph. And I think, yes, I remember the question about authenticity. And I think, again, at the start, the authenticity has to be clear. It has to be strong in order for you to grow it to something else. And in my mind, what I'm thinking about is, I don't know if you've come across a brand called Wingstop.
yeah,
So I met the founders, the 3 founders, on Tuesday. I was at an event, and we got on really, really well. And I was asking their story, because I've never had Wingstop, but my 2 daughters are avid fans of this, right? So I know the brand, and it was very interesting because the founders were telling me, and I thought they were the founders, but actually they said no, it's an American brand. Just a very quick kind of overview, and what they said is, look, 6 years ago, these 3 guys, they worked in the real estate industry. None of them had any food and drink, F&B experience. None of them had been involved with restaurants. They didn't even know this brand. Where they heard this brand was on a Rick Ross song, Wingstop. That's where they heard of this Wingstop brand, right? So, and actually, as a cold email, they sent to Wingstop US, and they said, yes, we're interested. The 3 of them got on a plane, went over to America, and they secured the UK rights for Wingstop. This was 6 years ago. 6 years on now, they have 45 stores in the UK. Every single one is managed and operated by themselves. They haven't franchised any of the stores. They're opening 17 restaurants this year alone. Globally, there is about 2,500 Wingstop restaurants, but in the UK, these 3 guys run it. I was super impressed by that story within 6 years from 3 guys who had no, F&B experience. But the authenticity was created on day one in the US, and I think this is where it goes back to the authenticity. Is that if it's authentic, if that authenticity is strong, it will carry you through 2,500 restaurants, as long as it's managed correctly. So, I don't know if you've seen the movie, The Founder.
yeah,
One of my favorite movies. And
big fan.
And there's that moment in the movie where, Ray Kroc is opening up all these franchises, and then there's some McDonald's that are selling hot dogs and things like that, and he gets really angry, really frustrated, because the authenticity has changed. So that's why there has to be that consistency of management. So it can start as one thing, but then in order for it to be something else, it needs control. It needs something else injected into it.
KP, as we have you in the studio, what we like to do for all of our guests, you mentioned AI actually at some point earlier in this conversation, and I'm fascinated by generative AI in terms of, text to image, text to video. And I love using it as a kind of creative tool to kind of think about conceptualizing dishes, conceptualizing ideas. And we do a lot of work with brands, and we'll look at how we can kind of translate that brand in a way into a dish and into an edible experience. And I wanted to turn some of that creativity towards what we do with the podcast. And so for all the guests that are coming on,
I'm scared all of a sudden.
and so for all of the guests who are coming on, we have created a personalized dish that is a gift for you to take away with you. Now, this dish, I've generated an AI, and essentially I sit there and I think about the person's character, some of the things that represent them. So you'll notice that it's a white and gold tones on the plateware itself, and that represents the Founders Club colors and tones that you guys use.
Mm-hmm.
We have, if you notice that kind of coral effect on the plate itself, and that's there to represent the Maldives, because I constantly see you on these lovely holidays over there. So we've got that there.
Sure.
And then the selection of the ingredients and the food that's on the plate has taken inspiration from your Indian heritage. So we wanted to include some of that lovely vibrant colors and spices in there. And then you've got, which you can kind of see in the background there, a nice kind of slate background, which for me has a, well, yeah, it's kind of luxury that I wanted to kind of add in there. All things as to how I see you, Mr. KP, and I wanted to represent those in a dish. And that's something for you to remember us by.
That's extremely kind of you, Joseph. I really, really appreciate that. And it's art is one of those very subjective things, right? And it's wonderful because, you know, when I meet artists and artists hate answering this question, I always ask the artist, what were you thinking when you were creating that? You know, and artists hate answering that because artists are interested in what I'm thinking or what I was going through my mind when I'm looking at that, you know. But, you know, when I see something like this and you explain it, it's, you know, when you say the coral, the whites and the, you know, the coral, get it. You know, when you talk about the colors, get it. You know, all of a sudden, it brings it all together and it makes sense.
Sure.
I absolutely love it. Thank you so much.
No, you're welcome.
Really appreciate that. Thank you.
KP, how can people find out more about what's going on at the Founders Club? And for people who have listened to this and maybe want to be part of that network. So I should say that, I mean, I've been a member since it's probably about
21, maybe?
Or 21. Yeah, could be.
Yeah.
And what I have to say is I've met some incredible, very inspiring people. I've attended some incredible experiences that you guys have hosted over the last few years. It's been great to meet other founders. It's been inspirational. You host some great kind of talks that for someone like myself, it's great exposure to the types of people that you have speaking and to share their ideas and their knowledge. For those who are interested in finding out more about the Founders Club and would potentially like to join, how do they go about that?
So we're very active on Instagram. So at Founders Club, spelt the E is replaced with an X. So
why is that?
It's because so there was X is always known as, over the last few years, as we've all seen it, you know, you'll see as kind of connection, partnership. You know?
Yeah.
So when you see, you'll have Kitchen Theory X Founders Club.
Yeah.
So that there's that connection.
Yeah.
That's where the concept initially started of, you know, saying that actually, can we replace one of the letters? And the E was the easiest one to replace to create FOUNDXRS.
Because I guess phonetically it's still Founders, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That also gave us the leverage to actually get foundersclub.com and and Instagram at Founders Club. And, you know, so actually opened the world to make it a lot more easier for us to have that name.
So you see how I just explained my art and it now makes sense to you. You just explained yours and now it makes sense to me.
There you go. There you go. So we're on Instagram. Our website is foundersclub.com. You know, even if you just Google Founders Club, it hopefully should come to us. But we're, like I said, we're on Instagram quite a lot, LinkedIn, a lot of the social media. So
awesome. Then I look forward to, if not catching up with you in person, to seeing you at one of the events soon.
I would love that. Thank you very much.
Awesome.
Thank you,
Mr. KP. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Joseph. Or should I say chef?
There we go.